I'm Vance McDonald. This is the service my wife and I usually attend. She's down here on the front row. Her name is Kendi. She's beautiful and amazing. But we moved here 2 years ago. I'm going into my third year in the NFL. Of course, our Sundays are a little bit busy in the season, but we make it here when we can. And last week, Scott left us with a message. I started a new series titled, Are We Having Fun Yet? And we're not supposed to be working on our marriages per se in these next 4 weeks to come. But I want to kind of touch on some of the things that he said. This may be geared towards spouses, but please don't tune out. A lot of these are just simple truths that you can take and apply to your relationships with your family and your friends. So I would encourage you to listen. And again, marriage was never for our enjoyment. Elliot and Penny are going to come forward and give you the message. It was intended for our enjoyment. It was never intended to be kind of a life-working project. So as we move forward, last week we had our activity. I'm not going to call it homework because I would get in trouble, but we had an activity that we would go back to the early stages of our relationships and do something that we both enjoyed. This week our focus activity is going to be encouragement, and I would try to find something that your spouse could take 30 seconds, and it could just be something so minor, but you'd have no idea how much that could influence and just completely change their day. I stumbled across a verse. I'd like to read it to you. It's found in 2 Corinthians. It's chapter 1, verses 3 and 4. It says, Praise be to God and Father, our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion, and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all of our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves have received from God. Now, Paul's basically saying there's so much in this text right here, but he's saying God, he is the living God. He is the God of grace, of mercy, of comfort. He is powerful. He gives power to those of his people who follow him. He is the image of God. And most interesting enough, he gives us victory. He judges, he reconciles, and he appoints and motivates his ambassadors. Now, friends, I can't come up with a more encouraging thing in a lifetime than take me, of all the billions of people that have walked this earth and are walking it right now. I'm horrible habits, filled with sin, and God is going to die for me so that I may be saved, purified, and can spend eternity in heaven with him. I mean, that's so encouraging. We read through the Bible, we learn that, and the awesome thing is once we learn that, we can spread it. So I encourage you this week, every single day, find one thing. I'm going to be challenged. I'm going to find one thing this week that I can encourage Kendi with. You know, we haven't had the most traditional relationship. 7.5 years ago, we met on a cruise. She was heading off to Oklahoma State, and I was playing college football at Rice University in Houston, so we were 950 miles away from each other. Kind of difficult doing that, especially both college kids. We had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. But we found ways throughout the course of our relationship to encourage each other. Now, I've not always been the greatest encourager, I'll admit that first and foremost. But Kendi is amazing at this. And, we have a couple of images to show you. But, there would be times when I will find myself, this is a letter Kendi actually wrote me while I was out here, and even still to this day, going into the season, there's times out of the week, especially in training camp, I'm gone for 30 days, and we don't get to see each other. When I'm traveling in away games, there's 2 days out of the 7 days that we don't get to see each other. So I kind of say we got trained for it in the beginning, but Kendi will find ways. I don't even know how she does this. I pack my bag to leave to go to a football game, and we get on the plane and fly to wherever it is we're playing. And somehow, I don't know, she's like Houdini, this finds itself into my bag, and I open it up, and it's, hey, babe, just thinking of you. I'm super proud of you. You're going to do a great job at the game. I love you. And I'm like, I don't know how you find time to do this, but you're incredible. This is just a simple thing. I go out and play in front of thousands and thousands of people. It's nerve-wracking, but I look forward to this moment. And I have a couple of friends here, too, and we kind of always talk about it. It's like the peace and encouragement and comfort that you find from this before a game, because you could be so nervous, and you just read simple words like this and just a silly little picture that she sends. I'm like, all right, I can do this. I can do this. I'm not so good at this. for whatever reason, guys and men, we just weren't blessed with this like cute trait where we can take cool pictures of ourselves and send them to each other. So for whatever reason, so reading a little into this, I put the pressure on myself, kind of like year one, where, for whatever reason, that's the only face I can make. I don't know why. But we came up with an illy, and this is something that we do. Don't do it so much now, since we're married and living together, but I would send her a message every single night, being so far away from each other. And it was a reason why I loved her. And we ended up nicknaming them Illies. And, but I put so much pressure on myself, and it's kind of funny. I think it's kind of funny. It's almost haunting to me. Because I would lay there sometimes. You know, you can imagine year 3 and year 4 where I'm coming up with a reason of why I loved her. And I always try to come up with something unique and original. And so here we are, years into it. I'm like, what haven't I said yet? And it's like, there's always this pause. So I send her the message, and I'm like, oh, is that going to bode well with her? Is she going to receive it? Is she going to be like, oh, you're so sweet? Or is she going to be like, that's all you come up with? So as you can imagine, but another thing we would do, and it takes 30 seconds. This is us on our wedding day. But writing letters to each other was something that we just always found helpful. I'm not so great using my words. So whenever I have emotions built up, or if something ever goes wrong, or if she's dealing with something and I can't exactly understand it and cope with it and help her deal with it, I just write a simple letter like, I'm here with you. We're on the same team. If you ever need me, I'm right here. But you're incredible. You're going to have a great week. I'm going to pray for you. You're going to get over this. We just kind of show each other the teamwork and the encouragement, and you have no idea how much that could help the other person, your spouse, your family member. So moving forward, we have this fun hashtag #FunYet15. We hope that you use it because you never know what kind of, you could lift someone else up. Maybe they see it on social media, and that might encourage them to go and encourage someone else around them. So I'll leave you with this. Our God is an amazing God. He's gracious and He's loving. We come here and hopefully we study it throughout the week. Once we learn simple truths about Him, He just wants us to be an encouragement. Through us, He works through us for others. So I encourage you, find one thing each day.
Well, good morning. It's good to see you guys today.
Hi.
This is my wife, Penny. Penny will be joining us today and actually next week. Well, hopefully next week. We'll see how we get through today. I might be her up here by herself doing it next week. So we're in a marriage series, and we are just talking about how do we enjoy marriage and how do we build relationships this week with encouragement in them. And so we're going to talk about that today and fair fighting and a few of those subjects. Pastor Scott last week talked about marriage and it started in Genesis chapter 2. And I remember this is before the fall, this is before the end, and God had given Adam this great job of naming all the animals, and God realizes that something wasn't quite right, that Adam didn't have a suitable partner. And it was interesting because a couple of verses later, Adam then realizes, hey, there's something wrong. I don't have a suitable partner. And so there's a little tip to us. Sometimes we'll see things in other people that they ought to get figured out, but sometimes it's better to let them figure it out on their own. So once Adam figured it out, God put him to sleep, woke him up, and he was ecstatic because the pinnacle of creation was in front of him. Eve was there, and it was perfect. And that was a picture of the way God created marriage. Without shame, without guilt, just a perfect relationship. And then, of course, chapter 3 happens, and that's where we end up today, where our relationships have the shame and the guilt and the baggage and our past that really affects how we interact with one another. And so today we're going to talk a lot about how we interact with one another. But before we do, we'd like to just tell you a little bit about, I got to do the fill in the blank. You want to do the fill in the blank here?
You do the fill in the blank.
Okay. God created marriage as a gift. So God created marriage as a gift. Humanity made it laborious, all right? Humanity made it laborious, but if God created it as a gift, let's enjoy our marriages. Let's enjoy our marriages. So with that, Penny, tell them a little bit about our relationship, where this all began.
how we met.
Yeah.
So it was in about 1996. Elliot and I worked at PG&E. We were call center.
Yes.
Why am I having a customer service rep?
Yes. Good morning. This is Elliot with PG&E. How can I help you? Okay,
right.
so
that's the
that
number
type
you
of
call
thing.
for your bill and all that good stuff. Anyway, so that's what we did, and every so often they'd move you around, and they moved Elliot and I right next to each other. So we sat closer than this and became friends. At that time, Elliot was in a relationship, and I had just come out of a marriage, and I was a newly divorced single mom of 2, and working to support the family. And anyway, we became friends, and a little while later, months, years, I don't know, Elliot's relationship, they broke up. And so we all started going out together in our department, and it was just a large group of people, and slowly dwindled down to just Elliot and I, and then it was just us.
We were the 2 left standing, yes. And we always enjoyed hanging out. We had fun together, we had good conversation, so relationship was easy. And like I said, from the beginning we were just friends, so there was no pressure, and that other relationship breaking up was not because of this. That was a totally separate issue.
But we were also at different stages in our life, too.
Yeah.
I mean, so for us getting together, it was like we have fun together. I was waiting for him to say something dumb so I can okay, there it is. Now I'm on my way. But it never happened. Well, not
until after
we got married.
Right? And then you say some things. But that's a whole, yeah. So, and now we have 3 kids, so 2 stepkids for me, and our daughter, 10-year-old daughter, Annika, is here. She thinks she runs the place, so don't let her know otherwise, all right? And we have 3 grandchildren. We have twin granddaughters, and they are both graduating from 8th grade next week, so cannot believe that we're going to have grandkids in high school.
Yeah.
And then we have a 5-year-old grandson. So that's kind of our family and where it all began. And I remember when we first got married, our first year of marriage was by far the most challenging, at least conflict-wise, the most challenging year of our marriage. And there were 2 types of conflicts that we ended up having. One was what we call roommate issues, just things in life that just are roommate issues that we need to work through. And what are some of those things that we dealt with?
Well, the big one was that I had moved into Elliots House, and it was his house and his stuff, and he was kind to give me one little closet in the other room. And
we only had 2 closets. I mean, I gave you half the closet space. So,
but the house was his house. So our living room was dark blue with just all these mementos from his travels and African masks and pictures and things. And so it really didn't feel like my house. And I remember just sitting there thinking, I live in a museum, and this. So if you look at his office now, half of the stuff is in there. But so that was one of the things.
But now I live in a purple bedroom. I have a purple
lavender.
bedroom.
It's lavender.
Yeah, purple. But yes, please.
It's lavender with spacious, nothing on the wall.
What other things did we deal with that year?
Well, we really want to go there? No.
Okay. But it's roommate issues are things like who's going to do the laundry, or where are the dishes going to go, how are the towels going to get folded, is it tri-fold or folded in half? Those are things, would you put the toilet seat down? Would you leave the toilet seat up? All of those types of things. So those are roommate issues. Those are things that in our relationships, we need to be able to figure a way to work them through. Penny and I have a fundamental difference on the way laundry is done.
I do the laundry, and the last load will stay in the dryer, and I'm done. I'm not going to fold that last.
Once she puts it in the dryer and hits on, laundry for her is done.
Yeah.
I think it's done because usually it's the white clothes in there, which means it's my T-shirts and my socks. I think it's done once it's pulled out and folded and everything's put away. So we figure that out, and no tension around that anymore. Now, the other type of issues that you're going to have in your relationship are really, I'm going to call them lifelong marriage relationships. You'll have 1 to 3 things that just you're always going to deal with in your relationship. They could be money,
holidays, in-laws.
Just every time you talk about it, there might be some tension around it. It's not that you talk about it every day. It's not that it comes up all the time. But when it does come up, there's some tension around it. And as we're saying this, you can probably identify one or two of those things in your relationship. And those are the things that we need, and we're going to talk through those a little bit more this morning, but those are the things that we need to figure out how to navigate through those, because we're two humans who are trying to live together and have a household, you're just going to have some of those challenges. And so, our first year of marriage, we decided today that we're going to bring in probably our biggest fight ever, or at least, if not, top 3.
That's the biggest.
And really, the nexus of all of it was right here in this room. So it'll be a good one. So please.
Let me start, because he always forgets the 2 main parts to this. So when we got married, we decided that any purchases made over $49.95 we had to talk about. And I say $49.95 because I like to buy things off TV.
Infomercials.
Yeah.
Flow.
The Revo hairstyle,
yes.
Clean and Bright, whatever, DVDs, whatever. So it was anything over this amount we would discuss. That was the first thing.
Yes.
Right. Second, it has to do with money. Our thing is revolves around finances, I guess. The second thing is a week before, now it's getting closer.
It is.
2 weeks before this event, Elliot gave me a credit card and said, you use this credit card only in emergency. So
this was our first marriage credit card.
Right.
Let
me finish.
Trusting with the credit card.
He said, and he's looking down at me, even if you get stuck on the side of the road, you do not use this credit card. This is an emergency credit card. Don't use this credit card.
And I'm 6'2" and she's 5 foot, so anything looks like and I probably was pointing to, that probably was happening, looks like I'm looking down upon. But yes,
okay,
I did.
So let's remember this. $49.95 is our number, and that credit card. Now you can tell the story.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So we were having a fundraiser here for our school, and it was a huge fundraiser. There was silent auctions, and there was a big banquet dinner in here, and there was a live auction, and they were auctioning off cruises and vacations, but also a bunch of 49ers signed memorabilia. Jerry Rice jerseys, Ronnie Lott stuff. But the one thing that I wanted was...
But I was gone.
She was gone when this came up for auction.
I had to leave, so it wasn't like we talked about this, what he's always wanted.
Yeah, we did not have that conversation pre, and the babysitter was up, so she left, and I'm still sitting at the table over here, and this item... full-size 49er helmet signed by the 2002 49ers. You got Jeff Garcia on here, Terrell Owens, Dana Stubblefield. I always wanted this. So, came up for auction. And those paddles? They go up so easy. I don't know how they work that. But they started at like $350 and $450 and $5 and $6 and $7 and $8. And then it got to $950. And I said, that's it. $950, yes. Which is more than $49.95, for those of you doing the math out there. This is my last one. I'm not going over 1,000, because 1,000 is ridiculous. $950, that makes sense, but 1,000 is ridiculous. And of course, the person that I was going up against apparently thought the same thing. And so going once, going twice, I'm now the proud owner of a 49er helmet signed by the 2002 49ers, but I knew that this was going to cause a little tension at home. 6 months into the marriage, I'd already figured that out. So I called her. I'd agreed to stay and clean up in the evening after the event. So I called her, Penny, you're going to be so stoked. I got this helmet. I've always wanted it, signed by the whole team. It's great. And
Please
it wasn't
tell me
going so
$49.95.
well on the other side. And of course, she asks,
how much was it?
That, and how did you pay for it? Well, a credit card. You mean that emergency credit card that we're not allowed to use for anything? But I had a commission check coming in like 3 weeks. I knew we were good. So, commission checks aren't from Church on the Hill, just in case you're wondering. Okay. I was pre-working here. So, got home, and it went
bad.
It went south fast.
Yeah.
Just ugly fight. Just things were said, and just terrible fight. Yeah. And so the next morning I wake up and I'm like, well, if she doesn't want me to have the helmet, that's fine. I'll sell it. It's really not that big of a deal. So I go on eBay and I'm looking like, where can I sell this? How can I get rid of this? I mean, I've always wanted this.
Okay, And that's what Steve was saying. It's what I've always wanted.
I always wanted a helmet.
And I felt bad the next day, too, and I told him, I said, you know what? If you really want it, you can have it, but...
one more thing. We got to say one more thing. My wife, and this still goes to today, she has this number that in her mind is what all things are, the value of something is gauged upon. And that
I drove a 1988 Ford Festiva for 2 years that I paid $850. And that I drove up until a week before we got married because I got hit. But anyway, so $850, I can't drive that.
Yes. So it might be useful for y'all on a Sunday morning, but for me, my wife doesn't see the value in it. So she said I can have it with one except. Well, there was a condition, and that is that for every 49er game I watched that season, I had to wear the helmet. So I did, and it's too small for me, and it crushes my head, so it really didn't last that long. It also was the star on our Christmas tree that year. So you can see we got good use out of it. It now sits in my office in a case. So that was the cause of really what ended up being one of the biggest arguments that we have had. And a few of the things that we would do in our early days that we've gotten better at, and we'll talk about these in a few minutes in more detail, but low blows. Low blows is something that, is something that was part of our relationship and the way we would fight. Also, not fighting one fight. You start one fight, then all of a sudden you start bringing in this and that, and now you have 3 or 4 things going. And probably one of the key ones was not being convinced that we were on the same team.
Yeah. I think I was in a abusive relationship, and so it was hard for me to trust. And so for me to think that Elliot was on my side, on my side, was really hard for me. So the first year, that was something that we really had to work on, where he would literally have to tell me, I am on your side. We're in this together. But it took a long time for that to sink in.
Yeah, just that we're on the same team here. So let's do our first fill in the blank, and we'll talk about this one.
No low blows. Instead, argue with respect.
Yeah.
Sounds really easy. That's really hard.
So let's talk about what a low blow is. What is a low blow? It's when we speak to our spouse, but this goes way beyond just our marriage relationships. This is with our family, our parents, our siblings, our co-workers, people around us, that if we speak with contempt, it just destroys relationships. So here's what contempt is. Contempt is any statement or nonverbal behavior that puts oneself on a higher plane than one's partner. I'll just say it again, and then we'll describe it. It's any statement or nonverbal behavior. So it could be words that you say, or a facial expression, or something along those lines that puts you or yourself on a higher plane than your partner. So, a few examples of this. It could be exaggerating statements to mock your spouse. Your spouse is always nervous that you're going to get in a car accident, and you just overdo it, and you realize they're not laughing and you are. And what you're doing in that moment is you're saying, I'm better than you because I'm not scared about car accidents. That I'm somehow better than you because you're always afraid of this thing. Another one is calling names.
You're dumb, you're stupid, you're like your dad.
Yeah. All the words you don't want your 2-year-old saying, the S word, stupid, the I word, idiot, D word, dumb, all the words that we don't want our little kids to say, those are the words we shouldn't use with one another, and especially cussing at one another. When we say you're and you fill in the blank there, those are words of contempt. And so those are words we have to fully take out. And I hear people even just casually speaking to their partners and people that way. Oh, you're just a dummy. That's not okay. It's just not things that are building up health in your relationship. And so even if it's in fun, it's probably not a healthy thing for your marriages. Another one, this is probably mostly for us guys, because physically we are bigger, it's really important that we don't use our physicality to show that we are more powerful. So blocking a doorway, grabbing, holding back, stopping them from going somewhere, of course, hitting and any of those things have no part in marriages, have no part in any relationship. They can't exist. If we can't use our words and we have to use our bodies, it's not okay. So it doesn't have a place in any relationship, but especially in healthy relationships. And the last one, as an example of contempt, is reminding somebody of their past. And especially if we're going to pull out, remember who you were before? Remember you did that, and we pull out that shameful thing, or that thing that they're embarrassed by, or that thing they wish they never would have done, or they wish
the thing we wish he never shared.
Yeah. Like, why did I have to tell
We were
them
friends, so I shared way too much with him. Had I known we were going to be married, I wouldn't have. I think I would have kept some of those stories to myself.
Yeah. So bringing up the past, especially in the midst of a fight to try to get ahead, or it's damaging. And what you're doing is you're saying, I never did that, and so I'm better than you. Remember, you did that thing, and so that makes me better than you because I didn't do it. And so bringing in somebody's past, especially the embarrassing, shameful past, it's not in healthy relationships. In fact, they've found that contempt is the highest indicator of a relationship failing. More than 97% of relationships that have contempt in them fail. So if this is the worst thing you could possibly have in your relationship, the other side of that is where that doesn't exist, shows that you have a very healthy relationship, and those relationships are actually more likely to thrive. Now, the other side of contempt, of course, is respect. So rather than just being on the negative, what we do is speak about respect. And so that might mean putting ourselves on the same or a lower plane than our spouse, saying things like, I might be getting it wrong here, or I may not have this figured out, or, you know what, you might be right on this. I think you could be right, but I still think. And what you've done is you put yourself in a place of, I don't have all the answers. Even if you think you're right, what you're at least doing is opening up for the possibility that you're not right. And so to use things like that, or to bring up the things that somebody's good at. You know, you are so organized in the office. You are so good at relationships with your family. But I feel like that organization doesn't come home. Or the way we talk is not the way you talk to your mother. That type of thing. And so complimenting somebody even in the middle of the emotions. Now, I realize that once the emotions get going and all of that passion starts happening, it can be challenging to do. But I believe it's possible. I believe it's possible to avoid the contempt and really argue with respect for your partner. So, you have anything to add there?
No, go ahead. We're fine. Number 2, don't fight multiple fights. Instead, focus on the present irritation. So if you're in the midst of a argument or an irritation, and you start throwing in these other things, now they may need to be addressed, but try to stay focused on one. So fight one fight, get to the next one.
Yeah. If you're trying to fight 3 or 4 fights at the same time, you're never going to succeed. You're not actually going to fix the first thing you guys started to talk about. So get through the first thing, and then if there's more, maybe not then, maybe save it for a little bit down the road, but bring up the other stuff. It's not that we're saying, bury things, deal with it, but deal with it at the right time. Deal with it and not when you're in the midst of the fight. So, yeah, go for the next one there, Penn.
Number 3, don't fight to win. Instead, work to fight resolution or understanding.
Yeah, I love this one. Pastor Josh, our community group and high school pastor, mentioned this week in message team, and I thought that is a great one. Don't fight to win. Now, he said, I grew up very competitive. He played high school and college baseball, so for him, winning is everything. And so learning to take away that desire, especially if you're highly competitive, to have to win. The fact of the matter is, if you win and your spouse loses, have you really won? If you two are a team and one of your team members is losing, how have you won? You haven't. In fact, let's go this route. All of us have lost something. We've lost a game, we've lost a relationship, we've lost something. How does that feel? How do you like losing? None of us like that. So if your goal is to always win the fight, win the argument, and your spouse is constantly losing, how do you think they're feeling? So don't fight to win. Fight to find resolution or understanding, this middle ground of, yeah, I think that's the answer. I think we can live with that, so that both of you end up coming out of it ahead. Both of you end up winning. And it's quick quote for you here. I really like this one. I think it describes it well. It says, "Who wins the battle of wills and whims is not the point. The point is that each tries to surrender as much as possible for the sake of the other, so that the love between them may be honored and built up in every way." I just love that concept, that it doesn't matter so much who's winning and who's losing and who gets to tally up how many wins they have this week, but rather, what are we doing to encourage and bring love and support into our relationships? So I love that concept. Penn, next one.
Number 4, heal, 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 as in repair.
Yeah, this is not about walking your dog, okay? This is about how do we repair in the midst of the conflict. Again, if we go back to those 1 to 3 things that you might always be dealing with in your relationship, what are the things that they have found that relational experts, and this is not psychologists, this is just you and me, people who've learned how to have healthy relationships, relational experts, do a great job of healing or repairing in the midst of the conflict. So that will mean that you will bring perspective to the conflict, that you might have a little statement that you say that brings a little bit of levity, not to make light of the situation, but again, just to bring perspective. Tell them one of the things that we do.
At our house, we have a really small kitchen, and so when we're both in there, I'm 5 feet, he's 6'2", he's like all on top of me, bumping in, and we're getting coffee, and so I'll just look to him and say, "You're bugging me."
Yeah.
You're bugging me.
And I'll usually say something like, "Join the club," or "You're bugging me too."
And then we start laughing. I mean, and it's kind of like, okay, we do have a small kitchen, and
just acknowledge that we're in each other's way. I mean,
Yeah.
and it just kind of brings a little perspective to it, and breakfasts need to be made, and lunches need to be made, and we're going to have to figure it out. So the idea here is, when you're in the midst of those conflicts, what are the things you can do that rather than take the situation down into the pit, take the situation down into where the fight gets bigger, that we bring perspective, we bring levity, we bring those words and history in our relationships that lift up the argument, that make it better, that make it not so hard and difficult. So find ways. You probably already have them. They're probably already things that you've naturally done, but make sure you're bringing those to bear when you're having your conflicts. So, number 5.
does the fight need an autopsy? So, like that big helmet fight, I mean, we had to go back and talk about it, not the next day or the day after, but we did have to go back and talk about, this is not the type of relationship that I want. This is not the type of marriage that we want. So we had to go through it and kind of just pick it apart, what we don't want to do next time.
Yeah.
And so anyway, there may be times where you need to do that.
Yeah, just break it down and do it once the emotion's gone. And it comes back and say, what could we have done differently? How can we avoid getting there again? When I said this, I felt like it really set you off. Why did that set you off? Gain understanding in why your words are having such a powerful effect on your spouse, so that you know not to use them again, so that you know, man, well, I know when I say that, it draws this out of their past, that it triggers that thing that their dad used to say, or their brother or sister used to say, or that person at school said to me once, and you go, man, I don't want to be the person who brings that emotions up in them. And so the more we understand who our spouse is and where they've been, the more we can avoid those landmines, because at the end of the day, conflict's not fun. We want to try to avoid those.
Yeah. And number 6, does your spouse need a break? Not a break like a break from you or away, but 5-minute break in the midst of the conflict, in the midst of the conversation? Do you need a break to just step away, to process, to get your thoughts, collect your thoughts? Elliot is the type of person who, we're in the midst of it, let's finish it until, we'll stay up until we get this talked out. Where I'm not like that. I need time to process. Half the time I don't even know what I'm thinking or feeling, much less being able to communicate it to him. So I would have to just give me some time, and we'd have that conversation the next day.
Yeah. Which is hard. If you're the type of person who just wants to get it figured out, and your spouse needs space. In fact, I remember in 2010, we had a kind of a chaotic year. I'd graduated from seminary. Penny started going to university. Our daughter started kindergarten. So all of our routines were in upheaval, and we're very routine people. So when that gets adjusted, it's like there's just tension in the home. So we were driving down to Pismo Beach, and somewhere along the way, something set me off, and I just, volcano erupted on her. I'm just going off, and I remember looking at her going, like, what are you thinking right now? What are you feeling? Would you tell me, say something to me?
And I was just crying. I'm like, I don't know what I'm feeling. I didn't. I mean, at that time, I couldn't even figure out what I was feeling. And we ended up having a nice time anyway. But we had to go and have that conversation. And really, then I was able to communicate to him what was going on with me. And
we got to the hotel, and you pull up in the parking lot, and there's snot and big red noses. And you're like, this is a great way to start our fun weekend away. But we put things aside for the night. And that next morning, we got up, and we kind of figured out how does it have to look, and what do our routines look like. And we were able to put together a plan, and we're still married.
Before we go on, seriously, someone in the middle or in between services came up and said, wow, you guys fight a lot or something. And so, I mean, it's really not. I mean, we're talking about fair fighting or communication. But, so I just want you to know that, really, we're giving you guys all the things that probably, I don't know why I'm up here sharing.
Yeah.
Why am I up here?
It's real life, right? And, when Penny would say, I don't know, like, I don't know what I'm feeling, I didn't actually realize that what she meant was, I don't know. Like, I thought she meant, like, I don't want to say anything, or I'm trying to avoid this fight. But she literally meant, I don't know. And so I've now learned we need to have a break. And for us, like, I know the Bible says don't ever go to bed angry. Take care of it before you go to bed. Nighttime is not a good time for us. We're tired and into the day. Honestly, it'd be better for us to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and have one of those conversations. And so figure out what's best for your timing of your guys' clocks in your own marriages. Maybe it's on a Saturday over a meal, whatever. But it's important to know kind of what works for your spouse and what doesn't for timing and all of those things. So last thing, or number 7 anyway.
Forgive.
Yeah, last fill-in is forgive. I think it's the key, honestly, to a successful marriage is your ability to forgive and move on. We all make mistakes. We all blow it. If Penny's going to hold against me all the things that I've done to insult her or say things that are mean or rude, we'll never get ahead. But I need her forgiveness the same way she needs my forgiveness, that we just go, you know what? It's over. It's done. We figured it out, and we're moving on. And I really believe it's possible to forget some of your fights. I mean, I think we've forgotten more than I remember at this point. Yeah. And so forgiveness is huge. Allowing things, and if you haven't moved on, like there's still something you're harboring, work it through. But there is a finite amount of time to work it through. If you're still working it through 5 years later, that's a long time to be harboring something. Now, I understand, I don't know everybody's situation when I say that, but there's times that, 15 minutes later, we're moving on. It's something new. So forgiveness is huge. I want to avoid the tally. That thing where like, oh, I gave in the last 3 times, now it's your turn. I chose the movies the last 5 times. Now, no, I don't know. I'm not a fan of the tally. So just, talk it out. Have a good time. It's not a matter who gives in to what. So, all right, so that's fair fighting. Lots of stuff there, but that's kind of the negative side of things. That's like, how do we do this whole conflict thing well? The other side of it is, how do we create an environment of generosity and grace, of encouragement and support? I think that might be more important, because as we've created these environments of grace and encouragement and forgiveness, those fights are not as intense anymore. Those conflicts aren't as big of a deal, because you realize that your spouse did not wake up that morning trying to figure out how they can make your life miserable. Okay? They woke up that morning hoping probably to have a good day with you. And so when we walk into our lives with that perspective, it helps a lot. And so if you guys would open your Bibles, we're going to read a few verses here. We're going to go to Ephesians chapter 5. So open your Bibles, whether that's on your phone or tablet or paper. We're going to read chapter 5. We're going to read verses 21 through 33. So it's a bit of a passage here. So 5:21, Ephesians 5:21 says, "Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives, submit yourself to your own husbands as you do to the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything." Husbands? Okay, so that's kind of the wife portion. Now I would like you to note how many more verses we're talking to husbands here, okay? Husbands, verse 25, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or any blemish, but holy and blameless. Still talking about husbands. In the same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated their own body, but they fed and cared for their body, just as Christ does the church. For we are members of his body. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery, but I'm talking about Christ and the church. However, each one of you must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. So Pastor Scott talked through these verses some last week, and we're just going to briefly go through these here this morning. But I want you to kind of walk through the progression of what we see here. So it starts with, in fact, the verse before we read starts with people, follow Jesus. Let's follow Jesus, all of us together. Whether you're married, you're single, if you're Christians and you go to church, if you're Christians and you don't go to church, follow Jesus, okay? In fact, I think that if we actually did that the way Jesus lived, the rest of this would be unnecessary. We actually Paul wouldn't have to tell us how to live in marriage. But we don't follow Jesus all the time perfectly, and so thankfully he does tell us. So he says, spouses, submit to one another. So there's this idea of mutual submission. It's not about one over the other. It's one another, submit to one another. And then he goes on to say, wives, submit to your husband. Now, Penny, when you read that, tell us a little bit about...
The first thing that I think about submit is I think of a master and a slave in that way. But I know, me submitting to you, I trust you. I trust the decisions that you make, your heart, you have my best interest at heart and our family. So I can trust and submit to you. Yeah. There hasn't been very many times where there's been one, where you've said, this is what we're... I can't remember what it is, but there's
probably
one.
The first year of marriage. Didn't try that again either.
But yeah, so it's a mutual.
I don't actually remember saying that.
Yeah, you
but
did.
She tells me I did, so I submit. I agree. I said that. Here's the deal. Husbands, if we loved our wives the way Jesus loved the church, submission would never actually need to be said. It would not become an issue, because let's look at the type of love that Jesus had for us. First, he came humbly, right? He came as a baby, born in a manger, and did not come as a king, did not come to lord it over us. So we have this humble Savior. Then he came and he taught, He healed. He stood up for women. He stood up for children. He helped the disadvantaged. He helped the sick. So what we see here is a man who his idea was to protect, to care for. And then, of course, he went to the cross. And on the cross, he didn't want to go. Remember in the Garden of Gethsemane? He was sweating blood saying, please, I don't want to do this, but I know what's best. I know what's best. And so it's not what I want to do, but I know this is what's best for the church, for you and me. And so he did that. And husbands, that's our job, to have that humble, sacrificial, caring, protecting type love. Now, if we did that well, we would never have to say, wife, submit, because we'd be so caught up in loving and caring and really submitting to our wife and encouraging her to be who God created her to be, that it would never be an issue. And so I think if we live this Jesus type of love, the whole submit thing falls away because of the safety and the protection and the care that you're finding in that type of love and relationship. And so, guys, we have a huge responsibility to live sacrificially like Jesus did, one. But two, you'll notice what Paul writes here. He says, Jesus died so that the church, but also he's mixing metaphors between marriage, might be built up, might be without blemish, might be found holy. And I think part of our job is how do we come along, and this is a mutual thing, I believe. How do we come alongside our spouses? In fact, I think this is a parenting thing too. How do we come alongside our kids and see what God has put in them and encourage that into reality? You look at your spouse, you look at your child, and you say, you have a servant's heart. You are an administrator. You are organized. You have a gift of teaching. How can I encourage you to become the teacher or the whatever it is in your spouse? How can I encourage that out? And I'll tell you, the first place to start is in prayer. Start by praying that. Before you ever tell your spouse, start by praying, Lord, I see in my spouse, I see in my child this. Help me to know how to draw that out. Help them to realize that. Before you say a word, start praying. I remember our first year of marriage, I noticed Penny wasn't praying and reading her Bible, and I'd already learned at that point that telling her, you know what you need to do is pray and read your Bible, was not going to go over well. And so I prayed. I said, Lord, I noticed Penny hasn't been reading her Bible and praying. That night she came home from work and says, you know what, I haven't been praying and reading my Bible much lately. I think I need to get back into that. I'm like, wow, that was good. And much quicker than normal. Like usually it takes longer for you to answer my prayers. So thank you on that one. So start with prayer. So this week as we encourage our spouses, my encouragement to you is do the texts and the letters and meet them for lunch and do all the encouraging fun things, but also pray for your spouse. Start the morning, in the day, praying for them. Praying that God would help them understand who He's created them to be and help to make that reality. Yeah. And so, for all of us, we see in our spouses latent potential. Let's encourage that into reality. And when we do, with the fair fighting and the conflicts that we have, they become less important. They become less severe because the environment that we've created in our homes is more around grace and love and encouragement and forgiveness. And I'm not saying we can live without conflict. What I'm saying is even in the midst of it, it's not as intense anymore. It's not as emotional. It's not as bad as maybe it was earlier. And so I encourage you guys, what can we do this week to bring out, to encourage our spouses, to encourage our family members to become who God created them to be? Let's be part of creating that environment in our homes. So as we close, the band is going to come up and play a song, and our ushers are going to come up, and you've probably noticed some candles over here. And if you're here with your spouse or a significant other, I encourage you to take part in this. What we're going to do is we're going to kind of do that unity candle thing. You might have seen that in wedding ceremonies where the husband and wife, they each grab a candle, and then they go and they light the single candle, and then it's that symbol of two lives becoming one, and that symbol of unity and team and coming together. And we'd love you guys to take part in that. So if you're here today with your spouse, I know sometimes your maybe spouse is serving or they don't come to church with you, or you're single, enjoy this music. The song is here for you too. But for those of you who are here with your spouse or a loved one, please go take part of this. You'll grab one of the tapered candles, and then you'll walk over to the pillar candles. You'll light a candle and turn around and hand it over to the next couple in line. Also, you'll notice a little bit further back, we have our communion tables. And so this might be a good time for you as a couple to take communion together and maybe pray. Maybe there's some forgiveness that needs to be done this morning. So give you guys a chance to maybe do some business together. So the band's going to play right now, and I'd encourage you guys to take part in this unity candle here.